Tarkov's PvE mode has simultaneously become the game's most popular and its most controversial feature that Battlestate Games has added to the game in recent memory. Huge swaths of the player base have not just dipped their toe in and tried it out, but have moved wholesale over to the alternate profile, leaving the original PvP Tarkov behind. This video is meant to explore that move, why it's happening, why some folks are upset over it, and what it really means for the game going forward, especially with the approach of the biggest test imaginable, the wipe of the PvP servers. Now, for my part, I've dumped about 100 hours into PvE mode, and that's in various forms, but primarily playing a hardcore rule set that I set up on an alternate profile count for my main. I just did that to keep it challenging and interesting for me. This does limit my experience somewhat with parts of the game like the flea market and its economy, but other than that, I got a pretty good taste of what it's all about. I've also conducted several online polls, talked with hundreds of people specifically about PvE and why they went there, and in conversations with other creators to get a better idea of how the community is approaching the new mode and dealing with it. Now, Tarkov's game cycle up to this point involved periodic wipes to the game. These wipes reset every single thing about your account. Every item, bit of money, skill levels, and game stats are all gone, with the only exception being to your account's total hours played. That one stays. These wipes also usually come with additional content like maps, new gear, guns, new traders sometimes, or new mechanics or modifications to the existing mechanics. This is arguably one of the biggest factors to what has kept Tarkov alive and going for over 7 years now. This cycle not only brings players back over and over, but helps attract new players at regular intervals. Now, White Pipe is a special experience, and almost everyone goes through it at least once or twice in their Tarkov time, some many more. However, the PvE mode is the proverbial monkey in the wrench to this cycle. But if that's a bad thing, depends entirely on who you ask. One of the most common things I've heard from people about why they enjoy PvE so much was simply because they don't have to worry about their progress being reset. Now, this was right along with not having to worry about cheaters or bad netcode or not having to play against streamers and no-lifers, but all of those were usually described in different ways. The no-wipe side of PvE was by far the most consistent thing I heard from everybody I talked to. Now, technically, it can sort of wipe, because you can reset your account and start from scratch if you want. It's just the economy overall, the flea market, and all that stuff doesn't reset. So how is it that the most crucial mechanic to Tarkov's survival this long is also the thing so many players don't like? Simply put, it's time. There are a lot of Tarkov gamers who only get to put maybe 2 to 5 hours a week into Tarkov. That means by week 4 or the first month of any given wipe, these group of players haven't even scratched 20 hours into the game. On wipe week, me and many other gamers will hit 20 hours by the second or third day. We chew through all the content usually by the third month, some sooner. And we are either left looking for other ways to fill our time in Tarkov or for other games to play till the next wipe comes around. Meanwhile, you have over half of the player base barely scratching the mid-game in that same amount of time. Now, I've done this type of poll almost every wipe and through various times through wipes, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 6 month, and the answers are pretty consistent. This one, for example, 6 months into the wipe and 56% of the player base hasn't even reached max traders yet, let alone the substantial amount of content that is after that. But they get reset and they have to start all over again. With PvE, that is not the case. Folks can play at their own pace. There is no perceived need to rush in order to keep up with the pack. And if you want to take some time off from the game, you don't feel punished for doing so. This is a path for a huge chunk of the players to experience content in the game they have never had the opportunity to even think about, and they may have been playing for 3 or 4 years. Now, while I believe this is the single biggest reason, there are tons of other benefits to playing PvE over PvP that players have latched onto. The most vocal you're probably going to see is there are no cheaters in PvE. But I'll tell you one thing, anyone saying that hasn't played PvE. Because the first time you try to go up against AI PMCs or any of the bosses in PvE mode, you get taught a very hard and fast lesson. The bots in this, they cheat. Now, kind of joking, but it did take me a few raids to adjust my gameplay to PvE because it is much different. You have to play like raiders are everywhere. If you're going to fight them straight up, you have to cheese them on corners or hallways and choke points, and you can never engage them in the open. After this, you get comments and thoughts about how folks love not having to deal with the desync or the other network issues that lead to peeker's advantage, disconnects, or the dreaded accusations of ping abusers. And it's true, PvE does play incredibly smoothly. Hit registration is amazing, stuff dies when you shoot it, and everything feels more consistent. And it's so much so that I'm often left questioning if I actually killed something or not because it drops so fast I don't see it fall over. I don't know what happened. And this is because in PvP, as we all know, you'll shoot something and there can be anywhere from a quarter second to 3/4 of a second delay that something falls over, kind of depending on how good your connection is with the server and maybe some of the stuff going on that day with Tarkov as a whole. But one thing that I think that stands out to me came from Nikita when he told us that nearly 70% of the people playing unheard are playing on their own with no co-op buddies. That group of people right there plays Tarkov on hard mode. Solo Tarkov is incredibly difficult. And when you run into squads of players as a solo, if you don't have a massive advantage of some sort, it is really hard to survive any engagement against multiple players when you are alone. PvE Tarkov takes that bite out a little bit, and it lets you avoid those situations almost entirely. Groups of AI PMCs are no different than fighting groups of raiders. It's nothing like battling dynamic players. Now, in addition to a lot of these, this is one that people don't talk about. Some will admit it, but most won't. I think it boils down to a skill issue. I'm not saying that to be mean. Yes, I'm talking about the whole get good response or meme. It's real. And if people want to admit it or not, it doesn't matter. It's a factor here. Skill in Tarkov isn't just about raw skill, how good you are with a mouse, or how good you are at pointing, or aim labs, all that kind of stuff. Tarkov's skill is like 30% physical skill, 70% knowledge. And that might even be too generous. It might even be more lopsided toward knowledge. And gaining knowledge in Tarkov takes time. There's no shortcuts. It's lots and lots of time. I often tell new players, half jokingly, half not, that you don't even know what you are doing wrong in Tarkov till you hit about 500 hours. That time is something many people can't invest in video games. So in PvP, when they run into another player who has thousands and thousands of hours, they essentially get steamrolled.
Big Chungus is coming!
Now, this makes for great clips for streamers and their audiences who get to watch 1v5 fully geared squads get taken down by a streamer with a pistol, but it doesn't make for good and fun gameplay for the people on the receiving end of that. And since Tarkov has no skill-based matchmaking system, and I'm not saying it should, I'm just saying it doesn't, a first-time player on their very first raid could, and to be honest, usually does, get dropped into a raid with someone like Landmark or another multi-thousand-hour player. Now, there's no hate to Sheaf or Landmark in this. I'm just showing these clips to emphasize my point. Sheaf and Landmark are great dudes, awesome creators, and they aren't doing anything wrong. This is just a product of the system we play in right now. But that system is what pushes people to PvE. In PvP, they have to worry about getting curb stomped by a streamer after they grab their golden pocket watch. They don't have to worry about that in PvE, nor do they have to worry about being in Stankrat's next highlight reel.
Jumping ain't gonna save you, baby. Get one tapped.
Now, with all this glowing stuff I said about PvE, let's discuss the negatives, because it's not all sunshine and lollipops. There are tons of bugs in PvE that aren't in PvP. But I don't want to spend too much time on this. That's something that's eventually going to get sorted out. But some of them are incredibly frustrating. For me, and for a lot of other veteran Tarkov players, PvE also gets incredibly stale very quickly. It's repetitive, and honestly, it's just too easy. Now, I'll admit that's a double-edged sword. I 100% have days I don't want to play Tarkov because it's just too much work or it's too stressful. You can't just really casually play PvP Tarkov, or at least I can't. And PvE does provide kind of an avenue to, hey, I'm going to play Tarkov today, but I ain't going to sweat real hard. But one thing that makes Tarkov incredibly special to me, and I think a lot of other people, is the unpredictable and constantly changing scenarios real-world players bring into the game. Very few raids play out similar to one another, and that's coming from someone who has over 10,000 hours in the game. I don't believe PvE will ever be able to replicate that, no matter how good they make the AI. PvE Tarkov is a completely different game than PvP. How you move around the map, where the dangerous places are, what gear you need, and how much risk you are really taking into each raid are all completely changed. It's just flat out easier, which is fine. It's not a criticism. It's just an important point to this whole picture of what we're talking about. Things like PvE's insurance being a guaranteed return means you can do things like run T7s, grenade launchers, whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about losing it. You're going to get it back if you die, just so long as you insure it. Which in turn, this means gear is not very valuable in PvE. And that shows on the flea market. Most gear, even U-locks, barely sell for more than vendor value. And almost all of the money flows around barter items and ammo. This lack of wipes for PvE, while is a positive for many people, also means that there's nothing to purge the PvE economy. Since it still has a flea market, that means there's still money flowing around. It's separate from PvP, but functions exactly the same. But with no real sinks for money, the PvE economy has inflated far beyond PvP in less time and will continue to do so even more and more. Now, there is some unfair criticism of PvE, and the one major one that I can't get behind and that I kind of push back against every time I hear it is that PvE has or will kill Tarkov. First off, right now, we have no idea. Tarkov PvP feels stale, empty. The action's hard to come by. It's hard to find raids with other players. The good raids some people look for. That's what happens when a wipe stretches past 6 months with few events. And that's without even considering the drama around the Unheard Edition that drove some folks away from the game entirely. To me, the game doesn't feel any different right now than it did this time last year. So this one just rings completely hollow to me. But what about in the future? Could PvE kill off PvP? I guess of course it's possible, but I don't think it will. Some folks will never come back or even go to PvP. They'll stay on PvE, and that's fine. But I think lots of folks will use PvE as a stepping stone to get into PvP. It's training wheels, essentially. You can learn mechanics, maps, and dozens of other things in a much less frantic and chaotic atmosphere. But let's say it does kill PvP, because so many people go to PvE and PvP is unplayable because nobody's there. If that was the case, then I think Tarkov was destined to die anyways. I mean, all games eventually die, right? But let's say die off in an accelerated way, before its due time. If people aren't enjoying PvP, they will just stop playing, period. It doesn't matter if they have PvE to go to or not, it will die off. So blaming PvE or giving people a hard time who play PvP is nothing more than folks trying to stoke their own ego. Now, one cannot simply discuss Tarkov without talking about cheating. I just don't think it's possible. It's either going to come up in the video or it'll come up in dozens of comments no matter what. But I want to talk about something in this sphere of cheating that I think a lot of people might overlook or not understand. It's a point that may have flown under folks' radar, pun intended. When it comes to volume, from my research, most people who cheat in Tarkov are your passive cheaters. These are the folks that have some shitty top-down radar that shows them where other players are, and they simply use that to avoid engagements. A lot of times they're your kind of casual folks who just want to get in and out of raid with their quest items and not run into a 3-man Chad squad or get extract camped. Now, don't take this as me as defending their actions or justifying it. Cheating is cheating. I don't care how minimal someone thinks it is or how they justify it. You're still being a shitty person if you cheat. Cheating is stealing other people's time. And in my opinion, stealing other people's time is one of the worst types of theft out there. But anyways, these folks, now they have a choice. They can continue to passively cheat, risk bans and ridicule, and pay the continuous fees they need to have some outfit probably install malware on their PC. Or they can go play PvE and get essentially the same gameplay loop, if not better, that they had on PvP with cheats. So PvE potentially could have a huge impact on the cheat program market and just how they make money. Without the cash cow that these casuals bring in, there could be real impacts on developers and their ability to maintain some cheats. I don't want to promise anything. There's a little bit of grumbling about it in their communities, and it's just going to have to remain to be seen. And I'll full on admit, this is hopium dialed to the nines, but it's not entirely out of this world and could very well come to fruition. So wrapping this all together, what does this mean for Tarkov? I honestly think it's healthy for the game. It's brought people back who stopped playing. It's given a stepping stone to folks who can't quite grasp the game in its PvP atmosphere, and it gives people a path to enjoy Tarkov again that may have stopped having fun with it. I've seen countless comments about friends who gave up playing Tarkov some years ago, but they have come back with PvP and they are addicted again, and they're really enjoying their time with the game because of PvE. This is going to impact PvP. We just don't know how much. But does that matter? Who really loses out? If PvP loses the Timmy squads and the newbie players, it still leaves a ton of experienced folks around. And if you're somebody who only enjoys Tarkov when you can stomp on people who play a lot less than you, well, that's your problem, not everyone else's. But I do believe PvE will get boring for folks, regardless. And they will come back to PvP for that special dynamic you can only get against playing against other players. And again, while some will go to PvE and not return, I'd bet there will be more players that never wanted to dive into Tarkov before, but now they can because they can go through PvE. Only time will tell. I know I sound like a broken record here, but I don't think PvP is going to kill Tarkov. If anything, it's going to grow Tarkov's player base by making it more accessible to other players, especially if BSG can sort out the bugs, issues, and things like that, and then lean into PvE and just step up its experience and how enjoyable it is to play. But that's my soapbox. Appreciate you guys for watching, especially if you lasted this long for the video. I hope I gave you some insight into this, made you think about some stuff you haven't. That was kind of the whole point. This comes from lots of conversations and stuff we've had on stream. So thanks to all the folks that come in and just talk and enjoy each other's company and can sort through some of these issues. But we'll wrap her up there. As always, appreciate you guys. I wish you the best of luck in your raids, and we'll see you in Tarkov.